we're going to talk about rebranding. We're going to talk about a lot of things that are going on. But given what has been going on this week with the new investigation, give us an update on sort of where we are and what happens next.
I mean, as you can imagine, I can't really comment on ongoing investigations, but what me and my team are committed to doing is what we've done all along: provide information quickly, swiftly, and completeness, and continue to do what we need to do to help everything move along. Even though if we don't have full visibility, we'll just do whatever we're asked.
Right.
But what I can say is the period of the rebrand has coincided with a period of very fast, very deep, and irreversible change in the organization. 100% turnover of our top layers of the organization, one that is now the most diverse in the NFL. I think we're at about just over a third women in senior leadership, about half people of color in senior leadership. And that diverse and creative team is empowering people to be creative, think differently, and really empower our business to do really well, evidenced by what I think was a successful launch of a new brand, and even in small things like the rapid growth of our season ticket member base, which is up 80% from when I joined. And so we're doing what we can control, hiring people of great character and seeing it pan out in our business.
So before we get to the real, I just have to follow up because, and I think I speak for myself, I think I probably speak for people in this room, and candidly some of your fans, your partners, maybe even some of your employees who are just like, why can't they get past it? Like every time it feels like you're past, you're not. How do you sort of answer that? Beyond what you just said, how do you tell this story in a way, in a convincing way, that people think there's something new and different happening?
Oh, I commiserate on this one. I would say that there's two things that pop to mind in response to that question. The first is that as people work with us, especially partners and sponsors, suite holders, as they work with us, it's a little bit of like, you can tell me you're funny, but instead just tell me a joke. Tell me a joke. And when we engage with people, they see that we are operating differently. The way we've invested in a first of its kind in the NFL content studio, the ability to create branded content that really moves their brands in a different way, because we've brought in people of diverse demography and diverse backgrounds to create it. It's showing and proving that we are what we say we are. So that's one, it's just engaging with people. And the more that we are out there engaging, even something like this, where I can actually share authentically our story, makes a difference. I'd say that the second thing is, if you look at the tangible measurables, that while there has been difficulties in the past, and certainly when we stepped in, the business was not in a strong place, but there is tangible and real momentum on the upswing. The season ticket member base was low when we got here. It's up 80%. We expect it to be up 150% by the time the new season starts. Still a long way to go to fill our stadium, but that is real, palpable, tangible progress because of a transformed ticket office that has new facilities, that has proper training, that looks like the frickin' United Nations, and is energized and excited and believe in what we're doing. And so I point to those two things: the engagement with us, how we leave people feeling, and then the underlying measurable impact that shows we're on the upswing.
How do you stay optimistic?
I feel like when I engage with brilliant, interesting, diverse sets of people, you can't help but be optimistic. When I talk to our fans and I hear their stories about their love for this historic franchise, which I did a ton of in this rebrand process. Yeah. You hear stories about their families and what the memories of the old logo and old name meant to them, how it was a binder in their families when they buried their grandmother in this. You hear other people talk about how the name change itself, or the recension of the name, meant something to them because it's something that they had been advocating for some time, and it felt like something that was changing society in a positive way from their worldview. So when I talk to people and I see the enduring power of sports to be at the heart and core of our social dialogue, and more importantly, people's emotional connection and the way they feel in a time where we all need to feel a little bit damn good with everything that's going on, I get inspired, I get optimistic, and I feel a sense of responsibility that's positive to help us continue to move towards a unified perspective that is freaking good. Yeah. And that was the approach of our rebrand.
So when we talk about the rebrand, I think back to some conversations that we had when you first took this job, and I, like everybody else from the business world, was like, McKinsey guy coming in, he's going to do the McKinsey thing. and as you and I were talking in preparation for this, feels like you kind of had to set McKinsey Jason aside here. Tell me about that.
There's a huge shift about a month into this process. And this was the thing that we took on almost right away, because the name was rescinded, I think, a month before I started, maybe a few weeks before I started. And so about a month in, I came at this like, okay, this is going to be a marketing and branding effort. I got my frameworks.
Right.
We're going to do this sort of marketing research.
Dust off the binders.
Exactly. We got this. We got this. There's a formula for this. Very quickly, I realized that this was not necessarily a business and branding endeavor because of what I shared, how deep this name and logo and tradition was embedded in people's psyches, that this was actually more of an anthropological and spiritual effort more than anything else. We needed to give voice to people that passionately wanted the name to change and give voice to those who fought to have it never change, not because one is right and one is wrong. That I have my own opinion on that, but it's not worth litigating when you're dealing with something that is anthropological and spiritual. It's about giving voice to folks and bringing them along a journey. And so while we did something that I think was cool, a series of content called Making the Brand. And every few months, we would do a behind-the-scenes look at the rebranding process and show people what had been done, where we were, the analysis we were doing. And sometimes we made big statements after engaging with the Native and Indigenous community, why we were going to go away from a name that a lot of people wanted. But we were going to prioritize Native and Indigenous voices in this process. So we showed our work a little bit, and that was great for our sponsors. We could put sponsors on it. It was great branded content, and it helped us in our sponsor pipeline. But more importantly, it allowed people to go on a journey. People who needed to grieve the loss of the old name. It gave them time to move through that process. For those that were excited and needed to build into what was coming next, or see their favorite name sort of fall by the wayside, we needed to bring them on a journey that was psychological more than anything. And I think it went well. The strategy is a bit of a bold strategy, because there's an alternative that's like, sneak out the new name in the middle of the night and rip the Band-Aid. We decided not to do that, and I think it's paid off, because we thought it was going to take a long time to get to neutral sentiment, and we're already approaching it. Our single-day sales on Fanatics broke records. We sold, within 12 hours, a record amount of merchandise on Fanatics. And more importantly, we saw a huge boost inbound to our ticket office, which is a critical thing to refill our stadium with people in burgundy and gold. And so I couldn't be happier with the launch. But it's just the beginning. We have so much more work to do to make this brand emotionally connect with folks in the same way that the old one did, and that's on us to do with our fans.
As you're talking about that, I'm thinking back 20 minutes ago to when I was talking to Arthur Blank, and he was talking about the relationship that he has with the players. I know that there's a whole football side of the Commanders organization that is dealing with the day-to-day of the players, but you presumably, especially as a former player, are dealing with them as men, as business people. What's the conversation like with them around the rebrand, around the history, and around everything that's happening? Because they have to be thinking about their own value and their association with this team. What are those I have to think you're talking to them.
That's a great question. First, I'll say something about Arthur Blank, because I was a rookie with the Atlanta Falcons in 2004 when we went to NFC Championship, and I was on and off the roster. I was getting fired every other week. I lived.
That's fun.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah.
I lived in an extended stay motel. I was running out of money.
Oh.
In fact, eventually I moved in with my aunt and uncle who lived on the east side of Atlanta in Lithonia. Drove 3 hours to the facility, and there was a moment at one of these community events, and I think Arthur probably knew I was going to get fired later that week or something, but he went out of his way to find me at a community event and tell me how he was impressed with me, my work ethic, that he heard great things about me and my character. And I don't know if it was a big moment for him, but it meant a ton for me.
Yeah.
It meant a ton for me. It was a way of esteeming me beyond what I could do just with my legs or my arms or whatever it is. I was much more than my body, a body to him. And I think that sort of confidence, recognition, and declaration of worth, while really small, made a big difference on me and how I saw my trajectory. So I just want to touch on that. And we need more leaders like that bring a measure of dignity as a man and as an intellectual beyond what you can do on the field. And we'll see more of these outcomes in the league. That said, engaging with the players. number one, these players are incredibly smart and super business savvy and understand marketing and branding really well, to an extent that we didn't when I was playing. But I think in this process, we have an opportunity to really help the football side continue to go on the championship path that I believe that Ron has set them on. And I think when I played for the Browns, I felt like I was part of something historic. When I walked through that building, even if we had just had a great game, you'd see on the walls Jim Brown, and Jim Brown was there, you know, eating lunch with us in the cafeteria. You'd see a picture of Marion Motley. You'd see Bernie Kosar come through. And you knew that while you felt really good about what you had just accomplished, you kind of weren't shit yet. There was another level that was historic and of the magnitude that is a true championship culture. And while we have a young and rising team that I believe is going to win a championship very soon under coach, the more that we can infuse championship imagery, a connection to our past, not losing that in the rebranding process, I think it helps our team understand that they're a part of something bigger. It sets their aspiration at a higher level, and it's something that is going to help us, you know, on the margins. I sure as hell ain't playing in the game or really helping them win games. On the margins, come in with an excitement that maybe gets us to that championship just one iota sooner.
So let's talk about sort of the broader story of the day, which is where I started with Arthur at the top of this whole program. Everything that's happened in the last couple weeks has reframed a lot of issues for the NFL. Issues you're very familiar with. You know, were able to become the first black president of an NFL franchise. The door didn't swing wide open after that. NFL has a problem. I will say, you don't have to say it, I'll say it. The NFL has a problem in this regard. What is the league, what do individual teams need to do to fix it?
That's a long answer.
I know. You have 8 minutes.
Okay, go. I'll say this that I can say in a curt moment. You know, first, I think that the commitment at the highest levels of the league are there. I think the commitment is real. I think the intention is real. But you know, good intentions is not enough, right? And I think the entire league, and Roger said this publicly, is being self-reflective about the processes and procedures that are in place. And I'll say this: as much as people are maligning the Rooney Rule, corporate America sure as hell ain't doing the Rooney Rule. Like, it would be interesting to see what would happen if you just had that for every Fortune 100 company as a rule. It doesn't exist. So that said, it's obviously not working. It's obviously not working to the level it needs to. And I think while it's a low point, there's an optimism that can be there, and that there's only 32 teams. A handful of different decisions all of a sudden take us from a low point to a high point. And I truly think...
Which is essentially what happened in the NBA, by the way.
Yes, and it's what happened with our team. It's what happened with our team. You have a black team president, a Latino head coach, black general manager, and then in turn, we have hired the most diverse leadership team in the NFL. And that's happened in a year and a half. So it can happen quickly. It's just a matter of quick individual decisions, and that commitment has to flow from the top. But there are, you know, bigger things to address. You know, if I started a real problem solving in here, we could probably all come up with some of it. But you think about how head coaches today, are they hiring in a way that actually provides the pipeline that makes people ready, accessible candidates for head coaches and general managers and owners to make? So, you know, if you are a young, up-and-coming, flashy coach, are you hiring your coordinators, your quarterbacks coaches in your own image? In a way that's getting your boys a come-up that you coached with in college or played with in college? Or are you thinking comprehensively about a diverse set of talent that's going to make you better instead of making decisions easier on a day-to-day basis? I think that's a place to talk about and dig in. And then I think on the business side, where I sit, and now, you know, in a short time, I'm no longer one of one, I'm one of two, which is great. Sashi Brown is now the president of the Ravens with a bigger remit than me. He's got football and business, which is fantastic. I think on that side, it's a matter of people like me and Sashi showing that leadership that doesn't look like classic leadership, and maybe builds their teams and operates a little bit differently because we have that different lens, can be successful in the ways that matter. And then you start to get over some of the subconscious bias that might exist of like, are they really as smart as everybody else? Can they really drive revenue like everybody else? Yes, we can. And I think there's a little bit of show and prove on us to be able to do that.
Right. I mean, it is interesting to sort of stitch those two things together, right? This more business savvy player that is being, it's like you spend more time than I do, but I spend time with players who are young and in the league. You think of a Christian McCaffrey, somebody like that, who was like from go. Probably in a different way than you were as a player. I mean, you were unique in a lot of different ways in terms of what you did after you played, but are really thinking of these things and maybe preparing themselves down the line and for a job that they never really thought they would be interested in.
I think these guys are coming in with a holistic skill set, whether it's applied to business or community service or whatever it is, that I find incredibly impressive. They're aware, and especially if you think about what they've done using social media to spread messages and campaigns, whether it's a cause they care about or even just their own image and likeness and their ability to build other ancillary revenue opportunities for themselves. Guys are sophisticated, and a lot of it is being owned and done by them themselves. As opposed to their agent hustling for them on the side. They understand it. They understand it. And people like Baron Davis in the back who are proper sophisticated investors, entrepreneurs, inventors. That's the next level stuff where I see folks going. But I do think there's something we can do on the business side of these organizations to support that. When a year ago the NBA teams were walking out in solidarity with social justice and racial justice, called I should start with the WNBA, who really led it. Our guys did the same thing, and they came out with two things for us as an organization that they wanted to do. They wanted to be involved in voting rights and free and fair elections, and they wanted to work on police reform. And they would be able to do the social media campaign and the hashtag stuff very effectively. But what I saw as our responsibility and our opportunity as a team was to put some real infrastructure and support around it. So when it came to elections, we were the first team to offer up our stadium as a super polling place. And we tried to provide wraparound services, partnering with Chef Jose Andres and World Central Kitchen to provide food for people in line, waters for people in line. We partnered with Lyft to get people to the polls. And so the guys' vision came to life because we provided infrastructure and resources that we knew how to do from a business standpoint to support them. But maybe the more compelling one, the one I'm quite proud of, is what the guys did on police reform and criminal justice. We brokered a set of conversations between our players, local law enforcement, and local activists, starting in Fairfax and Loudoun County. And what came out of what came out of those conversations was a bill that went to the Virginia legislature that is now law, police reform law, bipartisan, unambiguously good. And our players were a driving force of that. Then we went and did it again in Maryland through the same model. And that one was such a powerful picture. Chase Young was on the House floor at the Maryland House of Delegates testifying in support of the bill as it passed into law in the state of Maryland. And that's the opportunity we have to put our mettle, our business know-how, and the reach of our brand behind the things that players want to do. And I think the sky is the limit on the ability to drive systematic change.
So we've only got about a couple minutes left. What's next on your agenda?
Well, we got to fill our stadium with our fans in Burgundy and Gold. Very focused there. We've got to transform the guest experience. FedEx Field is on the upswing. We are on the upswing. Our net promoter score is up slightly over what it was pre-pandemic, which is good for us and inheriting it for the first year. But we're going to be jumping in the weeds and doing a bunch of nerdy stuff and traffic studies and operational studies, all in service of what our fans are telling us they want. A seamless way in and out. They want it to be a classic football experience. They want to walk around FedEx Field and see us tied to the history, not feel like we're an expansion team, but see Commanders tied to the old history of this team, really leverage our alumni to help tell our story of being a 90-year-old franchise of substance and reinforce why we landed on this name. It's one that we feel has the weight and depth befitting a 90-year-old franchise. It's one that broadly resonated with our fans in all the testing and importantly exemplifies the values of leadership and service that I think and we think characterize the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area more than anything else. And importantly, from an IP, trademark, and other standpoint, something we can fully own and then allow our fans to help us shape over the next 2 years as we develop new traditions that connect to the old.
Right. I really appreciate you and spending some time talking about this. I know there's a lot out there. Appreciate your candor. Good to see you.
It was great. Thank you, Jason.
Thanks a lot.